Okay, so in this video, I just want to continue what we've been doing, and in particular, just type up the 6 steps for this particular problem here. Okay, so I'll do that here, and I already have things started. And in this particular case, I'm going to start by writing out step 2, the model. It's not required that you do that, but often in these cases, the model is the central thing, and so having that formulated well, which often will be the easiest thing to begin with, to write out, will help you in writing out other steps, in particular in formulating the real-world problem and then the prediction, since both of those are related to what the model is. So actually, if we go back here and recall that the model is what we looked at in this part right here. So Semmelweis wondered whether the disease might be caused by something in the cadaveric matter that was being transmitted to the women after the doctors did the autopsies. So let's actually make this a little stronger, something. Okay, so if that's our model, that's our proposed solution or proposed explanation for this problem we said here. Why the death rate so much higher in the so-called better division, the division where the doctors are working. So we can formulate step 1 like this. Let's see. All right, so that's our problem. Why is there such a high death rate from childbed fever? Could have been a little more specific there, but in this particular maternity ward. Okay, so now our prediction, and if we go back and look here, recall that the prediction is, that's what Semmelweis had in mind, was that if this model is correct, then we should find that the death rate will drop if the doctors wash their hands before they examine the women. So and as I'm doing this, you might notice that, or it's good to try to just sort of recall what goes in each of these steps and then just write it out in your own words. I'll make it the wording much more natural, and it's a good way of checking that you understand sort of how this reasoning process is holding together. Okay, so that's our prediction, and now we need some data. And actually, you might recall from when we were looking at this earlier that I pointed out that there's some data up here. So this guy died with these symptoms that looked a lot like childbed fever. So there's that data, and there's also the data down here. So now the question is, well, what data do we want in step 4? Or do we want all of it or just some of it? And the answer actually is we just want what we have down here at the bottom, third paragraph. The data that we have up here, while it is good, legitimate data, it does count as data, this is the data that was used to create the model in the first place. When Semmelweis observed these things, that's what gave him the idea for the model. And so, although, of course, we want our models to be based on data, we don't want that data that's used to create the model in step 4. For step 4, we want new data, or at least so-called fresh data, data that hasn't been really used so far. We want that data, and we want to compare that data to the prediction that comes from the model. So here in step 4, we want Okay, so that's the data, and of course the data and prediction agree with each other, so oops. So exactly what we expected to find is what we did find. Now in step 6, recall that the first thing we always ask ourselves is there any other explanation for the data, which in this case is the drop in death rate after the hand washing. Now we can notice that there are other explanations for that data. So we can have something like, let's see, okay, so I just typed this up. Another explanation for the drop in the death rate is that maybe there was something else on the doctor's hands that was being purged, being cleaned off when they used the chlorinated lime. So that is, it's not the something in the cadaveric matter, but just something that came from living in a not very clean environment, 19th century Vienna. So this is a reasonable explanation. However, you can see here that I don't consider it as good as Semmelweis' explanation, and one reason why it doesn't seem to be quite as strong an explanation is because the midwives who were working in the other maternity division were also getting the same stuff on their hands just from living in the city, and they still had a low death rate. So this is another good explanation. It's the best alternative explanation that comes to my mind, but Semmelweis' explanation, his model, seems to be the best explanation for the data. So consequently, we can finish up step 6 with okay, so therefore Semmelweis' model probably does fit the real world. It probably does explain why the death rate from childbed fever was or had been so high in the first maternity division.